Samson and Delilah, a love that cost a legend his strength. Chapter 1. The Unbreakable Man and the Valley of Temptation. The legend of Samson was not built on whispers, but on the sound of splintering bone and the roar of 1,000 dying men. His strength was a force of nature, a divine anomaly that defied the laws of man and physics. It was the power of the Lord, flowing through a man set apart from birth. He was a Nazirite, consecrated to God, bound by a vow that forbade the touch of wine, the defilement of the dead, and, most crucially, the razor to his head. His 7 locks of hair were not merely a style. They were the physical covenant of his impossible might. The Philistines, the perpetual oppressors of Israel, knew this strength intimately. They had seen him, single-handedly, slaughter 1,000 of their finest warriors with nothing more than the fresh jawbone of a donkey. They had watched in disbelief as he walked into the heavily fortified city of Gaza, only to rip its massive gates, posts, bars, and all from the ground and carry them to the top of a hill overlooking Hebron. He was their torment, their living, breathing proof that the God of Israel was a terrifying and unpredictable ally. Yet, the unbreakable man was utterly human in his desires. His weakness was not in his arm, but in his heart, a flaw that led him, time and again, into the very heart of the enemy's territory. It was this fatal attraction that drew him to the valley of Sorek, a place of vineyards and olive groves, and a place where the Philistine influence was strong. It was there, in a house nestled among the vines, that he found Delilah. She was a woman whose beauty was a weapon more subtle and devastating than any sword. Her eyes held a promise of peace that Samson, the perpetual warrior, desperately craved. She was not merely beautiful. She was an enigma, a soft counterpoint to his brutal existence. For Samson, who had faced down lions and armies, Delilah was the first challenge he did not immediately seek to crush. He sought to possess her, to rest in her presence, believing his strength could protect him from any consequence. But the Philistine lords were not blind. They saw the moth circling the flame, and they moved with cold, calculated precision. They came to Delilah not with threats, but with a proposition that appealed to the basest human greed. "Persuade him," they commanded, their voices low and urgent, "and find out where his great strength lies, and by what means we may overpower him, that we may bind him to humble him. And every one of us will give you 1,100 pieces of silver." The price was staggering, a fortune that would secure her life many times over. Delilah listened, her gaze fixed on the shimmering promise of the silver, and a cold resolve settled in her heart. She looked at the man who could tear down walls, and she saw not a lover, but a prize. The unbreakable man had finally met the irresistible force, and the Valley of Sorek was about to become the stage for the most tragic betrayal in the history of Israel. The stage was set. The legend was about to fall. Chapter 2. The Game of Deception. The air in the Valley of Sorek grew thick with unspoken tension. Samson, blinded by his infatuation, saw only the woman he loved. Delilah, however, saw only the immense wealth promised by the Philistine lords. The game began subtly, cloaked in the intimacy of their shared moments. "Tell me, my love," she purred one evening, tracing the outline of his powerful arm. "Where does this great strength of yours truly lie, and with what might you be bound, that a man might humble you?" Samson laughed, a deep, rumbling sound that shook the small house. He saw it as a playful challenge, a test of his wit, never suspecting the deadly earnestness behind her question. He decided to humor her with a half-truth, a riddle that would satisfy her curiosity without betraying his sacred vow. "If they bind me with 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried," he declared, "then I shall become weak and be like any other man." Delilah's heart quickened. She waited until he slept, and then, with the stealth of a serpent, she summoned the Philistine lords, who had been lying in wait in the adjacent room. They brought the bowstrings, and she bound him tightly. "The Philistines are upon you, Samson," she cried out, her voice a mixture of feigned terror and genuine anticipation. Samson awoke instantly. The bowstrings, meant to hold him fast, felt like mere threads. He snapped them as easily as a scorched string is snapped by fire. The Philistines, seeing their plan fail, retreated in confusion. Delilah, feigning disappointment, turned to Samson with a wounded look. "You have mocked me," she accused, her voice trembling. "You have told me lies. Now, please, tell me truly, with what might you be bound?" Samson, charmed by her performance and still unwilling to believe her capable of malice, offered a second, equally misleading answer. "If they bind me fast with new ropes that have never been used," he confided, "then I shall become weak and be like any other man." Again Delilah waited. The Philistine lords, desperate but hopeful, provided the ropes. As Samson slept, she bound him with meticulous care. "The Philistines are upon you, Samson." The cry was the same, the result was not. It was worse. Samson tore the new ropes from his arms as if they were fragile threads. His strength was undiminished, his secret safe. The Philistines fled, their frustration mounting. Delilah's face was a mask of despair, but her resolve hardened. She had risked her life twice, and twice he had made a fool of her. The silver was still out of reach, and the price of failure was becoming too high. She knew then that she would have to press harder, to use the full weight of her affection to break his will. The game was no longer playful. It was a deadly siege against the heart of the strongest man alive. Chapter 3. The Loom and the Lie. The cycle of deception and betrayal continued, each attempt by Delilah more insistent, each lie from Samson more revealing of his inner conflict. He was caught between his sacred oath and his profane desire, and the latter was winning. "How can you say, 'I love you,' when your heart is not with me?" Delilah wept, her tears a potent weapon. "You have mocked me these 3 times, and have not told me where your great strength lies." She pressed him daily with her words, urging him, vexing him, until his soul was weary to death. This was the true siege, not the ropes or the bowstrings, but the relentless, psychological warfare waged in the quiet hours of their intimacy. Finally, under the weight of her constant pleading, Samson offered a third, more dangerous truth. "If you weave the 7 locks of my head with the web," he whispered, gesturing to the loom in the room, "and fasten it with the pin, then I shall become weak and be like any other man." This time the answer felt different. It touched upon his Nazirite vow, the very source of his power, though still indirectly. Delilah, recognizing the proximity to the truth, acted swiftly. While he slept, she took the 7 locks of his hair and wove them into the fabric on the loom, securing them tightly with the pin. "The Philistines are upon you, Samson." He woke with a start, but this time his hair was entangled. He rose with a surge of his legendary power, and with a single, furious motion, he tore away the pin and the loom, pulling the woven fabric with him. The entire structure of the loom was destroyed, but his strength remained. The Philistines, who had once again been waiting, were now terrified. They had seen him break every physical bond they could devise. But Delilah was closer than ever. She knew the secret lay in his hair. The final, desperate move was all that remained. She confronted him one last time, her voice low and filled with a chilling finality. "You have played with me, Samson. You have given me 3 lies. If you truly love me, you will tell me the truth, the whole truth of your strength." The pressure was unbearable. His heart, once a fortress, was now crumbling under the siege of her tears and accusations. He looked at her, and in that moment, the fate of Israel, the covenant of his God, and the very source of his miraculous power seemed less important than the desire to finally find peace in her arms. He was ready to surrender. The unbreakable man was about to break himself. Chapter 4. The Price of Truth. The air was still, heavy with the scent of wine and the promise of rain. Samson lay in Delilah's lap, his head resting against her thigh, the weight of his secret finally too much to bear. He looked up at her, his eyes clouded not with lust, but with a profound, weary resignation. He knew, in the deepest part of his soul, that this was the moment of his undoing. He poured out his heart to her, revealing the sacred truth that had been his shield and his burden since birth. "A razor has never come upon my head," he confessed, his voice barely a whisper. For I have been a Nazirite to God from my mother's womb. If I am shaven, then my strength will leave me, and I shall become weak, and be like any other man." The words hung in the air, a death sentence spoken in a lover's confidence. Delilah did not weep this time. She did not feign offense. A cold, triumphant certainty settled over her. She knew with absolute clarity that this was the truth. The mention of the Nazirite vow, the sacred covenant, was the key that unlocked the unbreakable man. She did not wait for him to wake. She sent a messenger to the lords of the Philistines, her message brief and final. "Come up once more, for he has told me all his heart." The lords arrived, bringing with them the promised 1,100 pieces of silver for each of them, a mountain of wealth that justified her treachery. As Samson slept, his head still cradled in her lap, Delilah called for a man to shave off the 7 locks of his head. The razor descended, and with each severed strand of hair, the Spirit of the Lord departed from Samson. The covenant was broken, the divine gift withdrawn. He was no longer the champion of Israel, the terror of the Philistines. He was just a man, vulnerable and weak. Delilah watched the transformation, a mixture of awe and horror gripping her. She had won the fortune, but she had destroyed a god among men. "The Philistines are upon you, Samson," she cried out, the words now carrying the full weight of her betrayal. Samson awoke, expecting to shake himself free as he had done so many times before. He strained his muscles, but the familiar surge of power was gone. He struggled, but the bonds held fast. He did not know that the Lord had departed from him. The Philistines rushed in, seizing their prize. They immediately put out his eyes, blinding the man who had seen too much and yet too little. They bound him with bronze chains and led him away, a broken legend, to Gaza. The strongest man in the world was now a sightless slave, condemned to grind grain in the prison house. His love for Delilah, a love born of human frailty and met with Philistine greed, had cost him everything. His strength, his sight, and his freedom. The tragedy was complete. The legend had fallen, not to an army, but to a woman's kiss and the lure of silver. The valley of Sorek, once a place of temptation, was now a monument to the devastating price of a broken vow.